This is Coach Jason Ballard, and I'm a business wingman. Over the years, I've learned a lot from working in our family construction business, serving as a senior officer in the United States Air Force, and running 12 different organizations around the world. Many people helped me get to where I am today, and it's my mission in life to serve as a personal wingman to others. That's what this podcast is all about, providing knowledge, tools, resources, and mentorship to help people soar to their highest altitude. And welcome back to the Soar Higher podcast. This is your host, Coach Jason Ballard. It's a real honor to be with you today. Got another great show lined up for you, another awesome guest that's an expert in something that we all need, we're all looking for, that I think can really add a lot of value to everybody listening today. So what are we talking about? We're talking about this fast-paced world that we live in and how crazy it is, how noisy it is, and all of the things, all the dynamics of life and kids and family and work and all of these things and how they just kind of build and compound on us and how we all need resilience. How to achieve higher levels of resilience to deal with things that we can control better, or even things that we can't control to the best of our ability, so we can be a better performing human being. So today we're going to learn a lot about how to be resilient. So today we have an expert in this, Shen is joining us today. Let me tell you a few things about Jason. He is an amazing young man. He's an entrepreneur. He's a business owner of multiple companies. He's currently the CEO of a company called Refactor Labs, where he coaches leaders in their teams through different types of crucial transitions in their journey, which is amazing. He's also a world champion gymnast that holds Guinness Book of World Records for Aztec push-ups. We're going to learn a little bit about that too. And also, he is an author of a book called The Path to Pivot. Jason, welcome to the show, my friend.
Well, it's not every day that I get to speak to another coach named Jason, but it is a pleasure, and I'm so glad to be on the show.
Well, it's awesome to have another person on the show. I've had a couple of Jasons before, and it's like the Jason and Jason
That's
show,
right.
right? It's like a law firm or something. I don't know, but so great to have you on the show. Well, Jason, tell us a bit about you, man, your background and kind of your journey and how you got to where you are today,
Yeah.
man.
So I'm an immigrant, right? I was born in Suzhou, China, which is a little bit outside of Shanghai, and my parents got the chance to come out and pursue life in the land of opportunity in the United States. My dad came out for grad school, and he called for me and my mom, and I grew up in New England. So I grew up outside of Boston. Spent 9 years in sunny California in the Bay Area, where I really immersed in technology and Silicon Valley, and sort of really cut my teeth in building businesses and being part of different ventures. And then I made my way back to the East Coast, and for the last couple of years, I've been living in New York and Brooklyn, building businesses out here. So I feel like I really bring some of that West Coast optimism and sunniness with the grit and practicality of the East Coast. So that's sort of how I feel about it, and obviously that immigrant hustle. We're going to be talking a lot about change and where you live and where you grow up, and just figuring out who you are as an immigrant is one of those things that just gave me some lessons on change very early on.
Wow. So when did you come to America? This is when you were really little,
I
or
was 3 years old, so I could speak a little bit, but I still speak Chinese and English, but English was as a language I had to learn after I came to the U.S.
my goodness. Well, with so much discussion about immigration these days, I mean, what was your experience like? Did you feel welcome into America? Did you feel like this was the land of opportunity? Did you, of course you were 3 years old. I was going, did your parents and you miss China and want to go back, or what was your experience? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember first going back when I was 8 years old, so it was 5 years later, and it's been very interesting because every year I go back, or every time we go back, China has evolved. The first time I went back, it was very much living in my grandparents' home. It was kind of like wooden floors. There was like an area where when it rained, you had to like stay out because there wasn't like full roofing in that area, and so it's kind of like a courtyard. It would get really
Hmm.
wet. We didn't have flushing toilets at first, so you had to use a latrine, and then there a guy would come through and like collect your latrine and like wash it out for you and bring it back to you in the afternoon. So that was like, how we lived, no hot water. And then every time I went back, there was something new. We had fans and electricity. We had hot water. We eventually got the toilet. Eventually got AC. All these sorts of things. So seeing China develop over the years is actually really interesting in terms of transformation. And then growing up in the United States, obviously I looked different. I grew up in an area that there were other Asian people and other Chinese people, so I wasn't like the only one. But we were still sort of, I like to say there are Asians on the East Coast, Asians in NorCal, and Asians in SoCal. In SoCal, you'll see towns where it's 70% Asian, and it's almost like you're the majority, and everybody. It's so comfortable, um, and then in NorCal and the East Coast, there's a little bit of, hey, we know we're around, we know where who we are, and we're accepted, but we gotta play by everybody else's rules and kind of figure things out. Um, but I'll tell you, one of the things that it gave me is a real sense of gratitude and appreciation because I was a good student in school. I got good grades. I worked hard. I did well, but I wasn't sort of number one in my class. I was not even in like the top 5% of my grade. It was a good school, but I wasn't there. But I was also a good gymnast, and I was doing club gymnastics. I was competing at the national level, but I wasn't number one as a gymnast either. But in America, that counts for something because you can be a student athlete. You can be recognized for your academic, you know, uh, capabilities and for your athletic capabilities. In China, you kind of had to be one or the other. So,
Hmm.
you know, when my dad came out of the Cultural Revolution, everyone took a test that was trying to put them all in college. Like, think 10 years worth of people all trying to go to college at the same time. So there was so much competition. And he ended up getting, the highest score in his like district. And that's what allowed him to get into a good college. So he was obviously on the top of his game. I was not anywhere near
Huh.
that. My mom was a gymnast, and she was a gymnastics coach later. And I trained in the facilities in China. And when you become an athlete in China, they at some point, if they see potential for you, they take you away from where you live at home. You start training in a regional facility, first in your city, then eventually like many hours away by train, and you live there. You get paid a stipend. You're kind of not really going to school. It's sort of a partial homes, like just enough so that you're learning how to read and write. But you're really training. And so those were kind of the paths available to me in China. But in the United States, I could go to college, compete in the NCAA, and not have to be a professional athlete, which I never did become. I had a knee injury, and we can talk about what
Yeah.
happened there. But yeah, so a lot of gratitude, and eventually, earning that citizenship wasn't taken for granted. It was something that we had to. My parents had to get it, then I got it. And I have a lot of empathy for people who come as adults because I know I had the easy route compared to folks who come as adults who need to get their green card and maybe get their citizenship or have to return to their home countries after some number of years.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey. What a journey. Kind of what I'm hearing out of that is, there were many things about China that you liked and enjoyed. And then there are some things about America that you like because you kind of get the best of both worlds a little bit there, huh?
Well, this one of the things I do in my coaching is I work with folks who feel like they're unconventional or maybe they feel a little different. And I think being an immigrant, it was that first experience of you're part of this culture, but you don't always fit in 100% because people are talking about things you don't really understand. You're not watching the same shows. Your parents didn't have the same, college experience or, any of that kind of like, what does it mean to get a job after school? You don't know about those things. And then when you went back to China, I played with my cousins, but they just had such a different life than me that it was also hard to kind of relate. And so you have to kind of find your own sense of belonging and find your own,
Wow.
grapple with your own identity because no one's going to kind of hand it to you.
Wow. Well, if that's not a good starting point for figuring out some resilience and identity and kind of where you are with things and how to deal with things, I don't know what is. So, what an amazing journey! So, you got into being a gymnast from your mom. How far did you go with that? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I started doing gymnastics in part because I was a kind of hyperactive kid, ADHD growing up, and gymnastics was really a way for me to get that energy out there, to really um, exert myself and just have a safe place to do that. And my mom was a coach, and so it's almost like a cheap daycare, right? You got to find something that works. We're already there, maybe we can get Jason in there a little bit, play around. And first couple of years, that's all it was. I was playing around. Then I started to actually, take to the sport and really have fun with it. And when I joined my sophomore year in high school, I switched gyms to a new gym, an Armenian coach named Levan, who really kind of took me to that next level. He really raised the discipline and raised the challenge and the conditioning and the sort of standards that he had for me. And as leaders, when you have someone who really raises the standard for you, but also kind of demonstrates that they believe in you, even if they're hard on you, they're kind of telling you, I believe you can reach this standard, right? You try your best
Wow.
to meet that standard. And in one year, I went from 25th in the nation to sixth in the nation in my age group. So I was on the U.S. junior national team. I got a partial scholarship, athletic scholarship, to compete for Stanford Division One men's gymnastics. And in my fifth year, I won. Our team won the NCAA national championship, and I was happened to be one of the captains for that team. And it was a bittersweet victory because I had a knee injury my junior year, so I didn't compete that year, and I returned to competition. But I ultimately re-injured it right before that final
Mm,
competition, and so we won, and I was a captain, but I did not set foot on the competition floor that final game or that final meet.
wow. Wow. So, what were your options at that point? I mean, how were you feeling? You trained so hard to be an elite level athlete, and you have an injury like this. I mean, did you get down? Did you get depressed? Did you? How did you deal with it? How did you work through that?
Yeah, it's to me it's like, and I think a lot of people relate to this, when something big that's tough happens, a lot of leaders and a lot of high achievers kind of take that in stride, like something difficult happens, a lawsuit, hits your firm, or you lose a big client, and you just go into like, all right, I gotta fix this, I gotta problem solve my way through this.
No.
When the injury happened, first of all, it was on a vault, it was in competition, very traumatic.
Mm,
And I was just landed poorly and sort of tore everything in my knee. And it's just like, okay, next step, surgery, let's see the doctor, let's figure out what's going on there. Um, and then it was like a challenge. It was like, well, we don't know if you'll be able to come back. And I said, I've seen too many sports movies to not know that this is my time, right? This is when I really show that I can make it back. And in our team, there were so many injuries and so many surgeries that so many guys had gone through that I was kind of like, this is, well, my time, it needed to happen, and here it is. So let me work through it. And it was obviously difficult because I never got to compete the vault again. I never got to compete the floor again. There were a lot of things that I really enjoyed
mm,
about those events. I was a six event all arounder competitor, but then afterwards I could only do two events: the pommel horse and the parallel bars. I really enjoyed the parallel bars. I didn't really love the pommel horse that much, but
right.
that's what you had to work with. And so for me, the most frustrating things were the little things like getting food, or getting your books and bags together when you're hopping around on one foot, or your crutch has an issue, and then it's slow to get around campus, and you got to wait for somebody to take you somewhere. Or there's all those sorts of little annoyances and difficulties. Sometimes those little things end up being more um, difficult to deal with than the big stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're faced with some adversity. You were kind of at the top of your game. You were doing great. Things were going well. You got a step back here, right? Had an injury, had something hit you that was unexpected. I'm a believer that when things happen, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for more doors to be open. So looking back on that, what doors did that open? How did that help springboard you into the next thing? When did you end up doing after that?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I don't know if I would have gotten into being an entrepreneur if I hadn't done that. I was a biology major at Stanford, and that's because I like science. I didn't like math so much, and computer programming was fascinating, but just I banged my head against the wall a few too many times to make that work for me.
Right.
So biology was sort of that path that kind of made sense for me. But I didn't really like lab work, and I didn't really want to get a PhD. I sort of flirted with being a doctor, and I said I don't want to start my career at 30 just to get going. Um, and when I injured my knee was the time when, you have a little bit more free time. You're not in the gym 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, because you're injured. I went to practice, but there were I would do my physical therapy. I would go to practice for a couple hours, but it was just not like I needed to be there the full day every day. And I used that opportunity to kind of engage in certain, student groups and activities that hadn't otherwise been a part of. And so I joined a group of other students who were participating in an entrepreneurial competition to do something creative and create value with post-it notes. Kind of a silly week-long challenge. We ended up collecting pledges for donations to a microfinance organization, and people wrote their name and how much they would give on the post-it note. So it was a creative way of using that post-it note, and that ended up raising several $1,000s in pledges. We won one of the awards for this competition, and the group decided to keep going to collect that money and to actually build a nonprofit that would support microfinance loans for developing world entrepreneurs. And we ended up
Wow.
doing a whole lot with that. And a lot of my good friends from college were folks that I met at that point, and that's what opened my eyes to this idea that you can kind of start with almost nothing. Post-it notes cost, what is like $2 for a pack of,
Right.
10 of them, and create something really valuable through your creativity. So when I returned to competition, I stayed with that group, and that's what got me into the startup scene in in college.
So what was one of your first companies you got going? What made you get into that kind of a company?
So my first company was called RideJoy. It was a long distance ride sharing marketplace. We started with rides to Burning Man, rides from SF to LA. These were long rides that could be shared. You could save gas money. You could, support the environment and have
Hmm.
company on the trip. And this was at a time when Uber was really just for this like luxury rich folks using it to get town cars, and Lyft wasn't even a thing yet. They were also doing long distance through a carpooling kind of business.
Yeah.
And I actually started that with my two roommates at the time. I was living in San Francisco. One of them was a Stanford classmate who had done the nonprofit with me, and one of them we had found on Craigslist. But he went to Berkeley and worked. All three of us were working at our own separate startups for somebody else. I was kind of like more on the marketing sales side, and the other two are software engineers. So it's almost like a cliche, classic three Asian guys who went to Stanford and Berkeley, two tech guys, one business guy, and we applied to this Y Combinator
Hmm.
program. And I really, that wasn't the idea that we applied with. We applied with a different idea, they said, we like you. We didn't even like your idea, but we want to interview you. And eventually they accepted us, knowing that we'd probably change our idea a couple times and they would just fund whatever idea we ultimately settled on. So it was kind of a funny way to start the entrepreneurial journey. But I remember getting that phone call. We were all just hanging out at our friend's house after we did the interview, and we were sort of unsure if it was going to happen. And getting that phone call was saying that they had accepted was just such a thrill, and the whole 2 year journey was a roller coaster for sure.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing story, man. And just being, the perseverance and just this dedication I'm hearing from you and sticking with it and taking a chance and seeing opportunity in the world where there's a gap in the market and going after it and being aggressive, man. That's amazing. So how did you go from there into being a coach and resilience and connect that dot for us a little bit?
Yeah. Well, Jason, that first business, I said for 2 years was a roller coaster because that roller coaster ended with a little bit of a poof in a dust cloud. We built a business to start helping people share rides across the West Coast and into other parts of the country, and then we realized that the real opportunity was in that inside the city because you could charge more. It was more like a taxi, right? And that's what
Mm.
these ride sharing companies started to do. And we felt that one, we weren't as interested in building a taxi business. It seemed illegal. We didn't have the mobile resources, and so we actually tried to pivot. And so this is also going to get both into my coaching and into my
Path to
um,
pivot.
path to pivot.
The
So we
path
tried
to
to
pivot.
pivot. We laid off our most of our team. We got rid of our office and we went holed up in our apartment and started coming up with new ideas. We were going to figure something out. We still had enough money to kind of work through this. And we spent 6 months just, hey, what about working on this thing? And be like, that seems like, oh, what about this? Oh, yeah, there's a competitor there. Huh, yeah, you're right. Okay. Tomorrow, next day. Oh, what about this other idea? And it was just like that over and over again. And we just couldn't align on something. And that was really frustrating to me. And I was the first one to break, like I didn't feel like I knew how to get out of this loop that we were in. And I ultimately said, like, guys, I'm gonna try to apply for this other fellowship in DC. And maybe I don't think I'll get it, but we'll see. And then I did get it. And then I was like, hey guys, I think I'm gonna take it because I don't think we're going anywhere doing this. Um, and I don't think I had the courage and the resilience to kind of adapt and say like, "Hey, this isn't working, guys. We really got to do something different." Or to say like, "You know what? I kind of like cowardly sort of slid my way out rather than just be like, you know what, guys, if we don't make a change, I'm out." I didn't say that either.
Yeah.
I kind of like soft pedaled my way out of it, and so we ended up shutting down the business, returning money to investors, but our some of our investors were like, "Hey, at least you didn't just, spend everything in a big, wasteful effort." But some of them said, "Hey, this isn't what we gave you the money for to kind of give us 50 cents on the dollar. I mean, yeah, 50 cents is better than zero, but we already were prepared for that outcome. Our What we're trying to do is get a chance at potentially building a world-changing company, and you're kind of just giving up, even though you still have money. You have, nothing terrible happened. You could keep going." Um, and I felt pretty ashamed of that, and took me a number of years. I did the fellowship in DC. I moved to New York. I worked for some people. I eventually decided to start another business. And one of the differences is I did hire a coach. I hired my own executive coach, Hamilton Shan, who was in my Y Combinator batch. He had been a lawyer, went to Harvard Business School, and he became a coach after he sold his businesses. Um, and that was really a game changer because now I had someone who I could talk to when I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing here. Or I don't know what's going on with this. And he could kind of be my first confidant and give me a level set and kind of put things into perspective. And we actually ran into a situation. My second business called Headlight, the hiring business, and 18 months into that business, we said, "Uh oh, I think we got to pivot." We are making some money, but this is not a technology business. It's like an agency. We're kind of placing people and we're getting a cut of that. And that's great and all, but that's not a venture scale business. And, on some level, that could have been, uh, I was this going to be a repeat of last time, right? Are we going to try this again and then get into this 6 month, drag out? But we decided to go for it. We gave ourselves a time limit of 1 week, in part because our employee was off at a conference, and this is back when we were all working in the office, so we couldn't have just snuck off and had a bunch of surreptitious
Uh-huh.
meeting. It would have tipped her off. So now she's gone, so we could have had that whole week to kind of just jam on a bunch of different ideas and then pitch some of those to our close advisors and investors. And then when she came back, we could be like, hey, we think we want to go in this new direction. We want to bring you along with this if we can. And we had momentum and alignment on that. So that new business ended up raising additional capital from Techstars, from Amazon, and led to an acquisition at Facebook right around the time of the pandemic. So to kind
Mm.
of connect it to resilience, to connect it to coaching, after that successful pivot, after seeing how much the world was sort of shaken by COVID and all these sorts of um, changes that businesses and people and societies had to deal with this kind of dramatic change, um, and my own experience with a coach made me think, you know what, I've really enjoyed being an entrepreneur, and I may start a venture-backed business again in the future. But what I what I want to do, and I started mentoring people at Facebook, at Meta, and along the way, I've supported other entrepreneurs and other people on my own team as they went and started their own companies and so on. That what I loved so much was developing people, right? And I thought about my own coach, my own gymnastics coach, Yvonne, and what the what he did for me and how he helped me grow. And so that's what drew me to it. And when my time at Meta was sort of felt like I'd really reached a milestone, 3 years, several different teams, several different products, I said, you know what, this is time for the change. And that's when I um, went into coaching full time.
Wow. So many powerful takeaways there, Jason, of being injured, right? We all have health issues at some point in our lives. Like nobody goes and lives, 80, 90, 100 years on the face of the planet and never has health issues or setbacks, right? You had those. Then that opened up some doors and opportunities for you to get into a particular business. And the market shifted and things changed, which it does. Things change all the time.
Yeah.
Markets will ebb and flow like anything else in life, right? And so you had some choices to make there, and you decided to pivot. This the next path in your pivot that took you. Some people say, yeah, maybe you gave up too soon. Maybe you didn't have enough resilience in that. But I think others would say, and I would probably say to you, looking back on this, as a coach myself, and say, well, the good Lord or something was working in you. It was talking to you. You were feeling these gut feelings about something different, something that wasn't complete or all where it needed to be. You were kind of unsettled, right? And then you got presented another opportunity which took you in a different direction, which led to a coach, which led to other opportunities, like right, I think that's a really good point for people to really understand here is where one door closes, other doors open if you're open to seeing the doors being presented. Sometimes the door opens and people aren't even looking that direction, or they've got blinders on and they can't see the door being opened. And those doors lead to other doors and other doors you don't even know about, that takes you to Facebook and Meta and changing, some dynamics there in a time where where people needed a lot of help. COVID was two things. One, it was a major disruption to everybody's business and how they work. And two, COVID accelerated things in our workforce on a 10 to 20x level that had already kind of been brewing anyway, right? With working from home and being more efficient, leveraging technologies, meeting people virtually versus in person all the time. Like there was that stuff was kind of cooking in the oven already, and it just accelerated it and forced that to happen to where it either works or it doesn't, right? And I think we learned a lot from that. You certainly did. And that was a major pivot for you. So, when did you know that coaching was like it? That was like the moment where, like, this is it. This is what I'm meant to do. This is what I love. I'm passionate about it. It ignited something in you to really get you engaged and on fire for that. What happened to reaffirm that for you?
Yeah. So I think there's three things that happened that all kind of came together to help me see that. Um, the the first one was really that I just put an up. I've been writing online for many years, and I think that writing and being public online has been such an important part of my own journey and my career and my professional development. But one of the things it does is people just hit my site and look around, and I put a slash coaching, jasonshen.com/coaching, and I just figured, maybe somebody will see that and uh,
Hmm.
I'll share it around over time. And somebody eventually did reach out to me through that just page that I put up and contacted me, and then we started working together. And this is my first paid client. And I'd done a lot of free coaching over the years before that, and little snippets and bursts here and there, and that was fun. But this is my first time, getting paid to coach. And I worked with this first client that first year. All I did was work with that one client every other week. We did a call and talked about her business and what she was trying to build. And then the next year, I worked with a couple more folks, and I started to just experience what different entrepreneurs were like. And I remember working with this one entrepreneur who, well, he at the time he was working inside of a corporation, inside of a big sort of pre-IPO company that was pretty large and established, and he was trying to climb the corporate ladder. But I sort of said, you know what, I don't know if this is really what you want to do. Like I just don't sense that excitement from you when we talk about this. And it came out that he had always thought about starting his own agency, and eventually we started to build a plan around that. And I just remember just like helping him go through that journey. And I remember being hanging up the phone after one call where he was like, you know what, my friend doesn't want to do the agency with me, but I still want to do it anyway, and I'm going to figure something out. So we're going to, we talked about timeline, and I hung up the phone and I was just like, yeah, like, oh my God, this is awesome. When you have those moments where you're like, my client is making a breakthrough, like they're really making a change. And I was like, I don't think I've ever said that, at least since I joined Meta, about anything
Ah,
that's happened. And so I never had that kind of excitement. So that was like, that's interesting. So one is just working with clients, starting to see that what lights you up, what turns you on. The second, as I mentioned, was I started to know some other coaches. Some of them, this client that I got was a referral through another person who had been an entrepreneur. Modest success, wasn't like $1 billion exit, right? But he had a modest success, and now had been a product manager, and now he started coaching. And he was doing well with it, and so it's just like, great to see other people who you're like, hey, you're not, if Jeff Bezos wants to start coaching people, and be like, good for him. I'm sure he'll do great with that. But I'm not Jeff Bezos, right? I haven't had that kind of success in terms of my businesses. So that doesn't feel relatable, right? But this person was doing it in a way that I was like, hey, that's relatable to me. And so seeing that was another sort of like, hey, this is possible. And then the last thing was what I was doing at Meta. I was a product manager, and I was leading projects, and I was building things, but I was also teaching workshops on the side, and people were coming to me and saying, hey, could you help mentor me? And, could you speak to my team? There's a lot that they're going through. It's been really tough. I see some of the videos you've been posting. I really think they could use this. Could you come to our all hands and say some stuff about resilience? And I remember one of my performance reviews where they were like, "Hey, you're doing okay on the sort of main things we have you do, and there's this one area of like organizational development and capacity building where you're operating really high level, but that's only a fraction of your total, what we recognize you for. So it's not enough to really change your score or anything. But like, we just want to say, hey, you're doing great with that." And I was like, okay, so I could keep working here and do a fine job as a product leader, and that's good and all. But this thing that you're telling me I'm really good at, you're not going to really value and recognize very much because it's just not the formula that you want to set up for the skills matrix and the competency ladders and all that you want. And actually, at higher leadership levels, that becomes a more important part of your overall evaluation. But at the levels that I was at, it wasn't really as significant. So I said, one of the things that I've always thought about is we're all CEOs, we're all founders of our own lives and our own careers. And when I left my company and I sold mid-game to Meta, I just exchanged customers or investors, if you will. And I had this one big client that I was on a long-term contract with. But at some point, every business owner knows sometimes you got to fire the client to make room for a new opportunity. And so I said, you know what, this client is not allowing me to really express my greatest strengths, my greatest contributions. They don't value that as much as I value it, as much as I think other people out there could value it. And I'll tell you, like this week, last week, someone from Meta reached out and said, "We're doing an offsite in New York. We'd love to have you as one of our keynote speakers because of we've seen all the stuff you've shared internally." And ultimately, we couldn't make it
Mm.
work because I'm in San Francisco right now. But to me, that was like such proof that you weren't even going to recognize me for that internally, but now you've got other leaders in the company reaching out to me for a paid speaking opportunity to speak to hundreds of people on your team.
Well, sometimes you have to be in the right place. You have to be in the right position, and you where you were in that organization was not in the right. You weren't in front of all the right people. You had a access to a supervisor that was giving you an evaluation. But sometimes people get caught up in their day to day, and they don't have the time or the wisdom or the knowledge or skills to recognize what to do with the talent in front of them. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges of today in the workforce is people don't feel um, fully engaged and that like their full potentials being maximized. That's one of the top reasons people leave today. And so I think that's really, really powerful. I think a lot of people are going to relate to that. I think a lot of people feel that. I know so, just even through my business interactions and coaching and all of those things. So I want to pivot here. Speaking of pivoting, we're going to talk about the path to pivot. This is a brand new book you've come out with here about resilience. So talk a little bit about the book and then talk about resilience. I want you to share some tips. Like, so if I'm in a company and we need to be more resilient and we're facing some challenges and we're going through some transitions, where do I get started? What is this really about? What are some of the things I need to be thinking about to get started? So kind of navigate us through that, Jace.
Yeah. So at a high level, right? The Path to Pivot is a book that's just designed to be a concise, actionable playbook for startup founders. Typically, they've raised some venture capital investment and they have gained some success. They've made a product that's getting usage. Maybe they're making some money, but it's not really on that trajectory to be, the next OpenAI, the next, Instacart or Airbnb. It's just kind of middling along. And so there's enough success that it feels bad to kind of give it up, but they also know that this isn't really in the long run what they're trying to do and what their investors are expecting from them. So the book makes breaks down a pivot from this like big thing that you just have to magically do and figure out something new into three simple steps: align, explore, commit. So align is to just have those conversations, those difficult conversations, and this is true for resilience too, is like opening the conversation of, hey, I don't think we're actually on track, and I don't think what we're doing is going to get us there, and I think we need to explore some bigger shifts in our approach, right? Getting aligned on, hey, let's open that box that's sometimes a little scary to open up, right? But let's get that box opened up. Let's make that conversation possible. And then we explore rather than saying, well, throw everything out the door and just start driving somewhere and figure out the next thing. You say, you know what, we're going to put this business on autopilot, on maintenance mode. Let's do the bare minimum to kind of support the existing customers we have, to not keep the product from falling apart, but just fix bugs, keep it up and running, and spend all the rest of our available energy and attention and resources on new opportunities, right? That build on our strengths, that build on insights that we've had, build on trends that are happening in the market that we have to pull our head up to go and look at. And then there's a moment and you set a deadline. Like we had that week-long deadline with the shift from headlight to mid game, my two previous companies. Set a deadline for it. Doesn't have to be a week. It could be a couple weeks. It could be 6, 8 weeks. But find a time frame where you say we're going to stop and we're going to pause and we're going to reevaluate everything. Say, do we want to go back to the old business? Do we want to pick one of these directions? Maybe we're not quite there on the different decisions, but we definitely probably don't want to do the old business anymore. Let's do another round of exploration before we finally commit. But take those deliberate moments, and then once you commit, you can be fully um, have high conviction around that decision because you've done your exploration. You didn't just jump out of a airplane with no parachute, right? You sort of had a more thoughtful approach. So that's really what this book is about, and it's grounded by obviously my own experience coaching my clients and a number of different companies that we profile, like you know um, Pixar, Twitch, uh, uh, um, the Intel. There are all these companies that made these pivots in their own businesses, and we sort of help entrepreneurs see how they can do it as well. And then in terms of resilience, I think they're related because pivoting is a response to a shift in your own business or adversity that you're experiencing, and it's specific to the sort of business context and startup context. Resilience more broadly is how do you respond to stress, adversity, and change. Um, and they're both skills, right? Pivoting is a skill, it's a set of activities that you can get better at, and it's not magic. Resilience is also a set of skills that you can practice, develop, learn, and improve at. And it's also not magic, right? And so I'll just break it down, and then you can ask me where we should dig in because I want to make it actionable for you. But I know I've been talking for a while. But the four skills of resilience, and then we can get into them, are responding, just kind of like in the immediate um, encounter of some kind of change, restoring, which is about kind of healing and mending any damage and any wounds that have occurred. Um, Rebuilding, which is about getting momentum in that new direction, figuring out what that new direction needs to be, and sort of taking those steps to it. And reflecting, which is about learning lessons, telling your story, sort of staying connected to the values and the long term aspirations and missions of your organization. So we could break down any one of those if you think one of them makes more sense for our audience.
Yeah, man, that's great, Jace. Thanks so much for kind of, outlining that for everybody and kind of giving them an idea of kind of what is this? What is this about? When you think of resilience, in addition to some of the things that Jason's talking about today, you got to be thinking about things that also are preventative in nature, right? Like you can make decisions that prevents you from being in chaos, right? why do you need resilience in the first place? Is because you're facing something that's causing challenges and stress, and you've got to deal with it. Resilience is, from what I'm understanding from your definition, is your ability to deal with these types of things and work through them somehow, some way, come to some kind of a crossroads on changing a different direction or do something differently or improving something in a manner that's going to make it better than it was yesterday. So you're kind of thickening that skin. You're kind of keeping your mind open to these options. And one thing I'll add on, I think you said it. I'm going to say it a different way. One thing I think is so simple and so taken for granted of is clarity. So many people out there don't have clarity. They're just out there jobbing and doing their daily work and just in the middle of the action and the noise and just keeping up with daily work and emails and meetings and all that stuff. And they lose clarity on where they are, where they're going, staying true to their values. And when they lose some of that, it puts them in a position where they need an excessive amount of resilience, right? And I think there's like different levels of resilience, right, Jason? Where there's kind of like this excessive triage kind of effect, right? Where
Oh,
you're trying
yeah,
to
I'll
triage
put it in a
something, right?
different way. I like
Yeah,
to think of it as like each one of these skills builds on the other. And so, responding to me is always like firefighting. It's just dealing with what's coming
right.
in, phone calls, problems, somebody has this and that. Okay, let's figure it out. And it's important to do that, right? If it's better than freezing and going, "Oh, what do I do?" Right? Like most people listening don't face that, right? They spring into action. They start moving. They start working through the problem. Talk to me. Bring in the let's get it. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get it done. That's really good. And in doing that allows you to not sort of fall further into the hole, right? But once if you only do that, then yeah, you're gonna just kind of stay in the hole, right? You don't fall further down, but you don't really go anywhere, right? Restoring is that next step of like, hey, that was tough. You feeling okay? You doing okay? I don't know if I'm doing okay. Like, let's talk about it, or maybe I need to take a break, or I need some help. Maybe we can get some help from somebody else, right? Like having those conversations can actually help you. Okay, now we can kind of slowly find ourselves getting out of the hole a little bit, right? And we're feeling a little bit better. And then the next step, but right, but there's some people who only heal and only do that, and then they kind of fall back in the hole shortly thereafter, right? You finally got yourself
Huh.
out of the hole. If you don't do anything different, you're going to fall back in that hole next time something happens, right? So the next step is to rebuild, to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to take some different actions. Maybe we should fill this hole with something, or we set ourselves up somewhere else so that we're not kind of in that place anymore, and kind of get creative about what new possibilities have emerged since this has occurred. And then that last step, and some people are good at doing that and just being like, all right, reset, we're doing something else now, reset, we're doing something else now. But if every time you reset you kind of end up in a new problem, then you haven't been reflecting, you haven't been paying attention, you're not learning anything, or you jump from one new idea to the next new idea, and you go, you know what, none of these are aligned with my values. But what are my values? Am I keeping those top of mind, right? So at every step there are things that you can do to kind of enhance. And everyone, like I like to say that everyone has some of these resilient skills, and we wouldn't have been able to make it to this point if we didn't. But there are ways that we can be better about it, so we can be even more effective and get further towards what we want, instead of just fighting to stay in the present.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful, buddy. That is really powerful. Well, Jason, as we're kind of coming to kind of the end of today's session, man, I feel like we can, talk more. We need to have you on the show again and really break some things down. I feel like we've got another couple shows to do together. So maybe we'll do a part two, part
That'd be
three,
great.
if you're
Yeah.
up for it. Because man, I think we can really dig into even more stuff and showcase this in a lot of different ways with some different stories, different examples, and etc. So as we kind of kind of wrapping things up for today as we're limited on time. Jason, thank you so much for what you do. Thanks for your story. Thanks for, being resilient and being an immigrant that's new to the country and not being maybe the person that looks like everybody else, sounds like everybody else, and still finding your place. That takes courage to find your place and to make a place for yourself and kind of create, your life in a place that you weren't originally born. And I think that's amazing. You've had an amazing journey so far. You're still pretty young, but you've had an amazing journey. Not top 2% of the people in college athletics ever make it to that level, right? I mean that's pretty incredible. And then your business journey is just wonderful. What are the top three things you want the listeners to take away from this conversation today?
Um, yeah, thank you, Jason. I mean, the first is always to me that no external success is ever going to feel as good as being aligned with your values and your loved ones and the
Mm.
people and your health. And so I would say that my first thing that I always think is don't sacrifice your values and your family and your health for some golden ring, because at the end of the day, it's pretty much never worth it. And so that's just something to keep in mind, I think, and a mistake that I see a lot of folks make. um, the second one in terms of resilience is that we need to get out of this idea of self-reliance. Resilience and self-reliance are not the same thing. That being able to do it all by yourself is good when you are, going from a teenager to an adult and learning to live on your own and, make your own money and support yourself. But it becomes a problem when that's what you think is the best way to do something. We are human beings, and the reason why we are so successful in terms of other animals and other species is our ability to collaborate, right? There's a reason why, the companies that make the most money don't have, five people in them, because you need a lot of people to make something big happen, right? The countries that are most successful aren't the ones that have 10 people in them. You have to work together, and there's nothing weak about needing other people and working with other people to get something happen. And resilience is all about doing that in a way that works for everybody. Um, and the third thing I would say then is to not be afraid of the change. That, when we have a good thing going and we think we've had some success, it can be like we feel protective of it. We don't want to give it up because what if, you know, the next thing isn't so good? And the reality is that everything has to change eventually. And whenever you try to like hold on to your success, it it never really works out, and you just got to lean into the fact that things are going to change, whether it's in your career, in your personal life, in your the way where you live, or what's going on with yourself. You got to lean into that change. I hope those weren't too abstract.
No, that was perfect, man. Jason, you are very articulate, and I was very clear to me. I think the listeners can get a lot of value from that. And thank you so much for taking the time to share that, writing the book, doing the things that you're doing to make this world better. You're a good guy. If people want to learn more about the book, they want to get a copy of the book, they want to learn more about you, your coaching practice, how you help people, and resilience. How do they contact you? How do they learn more?
Absolutely. We're going to have a page set up at jasonshen.com/soar hire. So that's going to be just for listeners of this show. It's going to talk about, they'll be able to download a chapter of the book and some case studies of companies that have pivoted. They can learn more about me, see some of the other projects that I'm working on. And they can also find me on social media. I'm at Jason Shen on Twitter, I guess now X. Can't really still get in hold of that one. And on LinkedIn at Jason Shen. And then on YouTube, I was able to snag Coach Jason at Coach Jason. So I
You
make
beat
some
me to
videos
it,
there.
man. You beat me to it.
I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
that's all right, man. That's all right. I'd gladfully give it up to a guy like you. I'm glad you got it.
I really appreciate
Awesome.
you having me on the show and being, such a supportive um, host and someone who's really inviting a lot of different discussions and conversations to the table.
Yeah, well, it's such a pleasure to meet you and have you on the show and provide, the insight that you have been able to share and be willing to share. A lot of people are busy running their businesses and making millions of dollars. And, for the fact that as an entrepreneur and a coach and an author of a book and all the things you've got going on to take time to actually give back and share, that means a lot. And I think it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you. We're going to make sure we're going to put all of Jason Shen's contact information in the show notes. We'll link all that stuff for you so you can just go directly to it, make it easy for you to connect with him and learn more, get his book. So, next week, we've got a really good show in store for you. Again, next week, we're going to learn about how changing your mindset can change everything in your life. You won't want to miss it. We look forward to seeing you next week. Hope you have a great week, everybody.